But that's
there's
it.
something going on with frequency, the fact that we live in this, just our consciousness in the current universe we're in seems really weird. It seems like a lot of intention is answered, and I really don't know what's going on as far as things have been in the last 10 years.
I mean,
man, maybe since 9/11, even the fact that just we maybe we are just shifting between these parallel worlds, and it's close enough, but there are these little things that are off.
That parallel, that effect that you just discussed, that like that thing with
Mandela, the Mandela effect.
Mandela effect. That I remember that shit. Okay, that is a really interesting thing. That's something I'm going to have to look into. You just kind of lit me up a little bit there. That's good. I like that. Because
I don't know if you go on Reddit, they have Mandela effect, and there's also something called Retconned, which is a lot friendlier community on that. But check it out. Mm-hmm. It's worth it. One of the things in one of your videos in the documentary is when you got all those helicopters are flying around. Right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing objects like...
I got sprayed by one.
What does that mean?
I got aerosoled.
You got aerosoled.
Oh, okay.
No,
that's all I'm going to say about that, too, because we cover that subject in the second film as well.
I can't wait to see
that second film.
By a big osprey that was totally black, that had no markings on it whatsoever, that was flying with another osprey that did have actual Air Force markings on it, but the one that aerosoled me came down from behind me and literally between almost sandblasting me with the dune that I was standing on and spraying this stuff in front of me, which I did manage to capture on videotape. It looked kind of like that flocking that they spray on a Christmas tree.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
but
like
it wasn't flocking. Yeah, it wasn't flocking.
Now,
that's all I'm going to say about that.
We interviewed a guy named Matt R. who he witnessed reptilians during Hurricane Katrina. He's been abducted by him and put all these training projects. Interesting guy. You can go back and listen to that interview with him on our podcast. But there's another guy who does a lot of videos about just that whole reptilian shape-shifting faces and all that. And there was a guy who put a lot of those videos out. He filmed nearly the same scene. I thought it was a video of his, with all the black helicopters flying over his house. But if you looked really close, man, if you see him again film it, these tiny little objects would fly. He has a video
flying along with him.
Not only fly, looks like it comes out of it, and it is an independent object on its own, really, really small, but definitely
Let me tell you a story about something like...
let
me tell you a story about something I saw very similar to that. When I was with Dennis, we were going to go get something to eat, and there's a sewage treatment plant which is near a location that we would film at, and we were driving by it on the freeway, and there was a military helicopter, and at that time they had these cameras that were security cameras, national security cameras, and they had one of them up pointed at the bay, to surveil the bay, and this helicopter was hovering right near this tower that this camera was on the top of. And so I'm like, wow, isn't that weird? And then all of a sudden, we looked over to the right of the tower, and there was a green, surfboard-shaped disc that was just sitting there. And I was just at that moment, I just started screaming at the top of my lungs, Dennis, get your fucking phone out right away. Hurry up. The fucking Apple phone you just bought is so important. Get the phone, right? And that moment, the door opened on this helicopter, and a drone, for lack of a better word, it looked big, though, kind of boxy, came out of this helicopter and flew over to this green surfboard disc thing and was floating next to this camera tower, and it basically got almost close enough to touch this green thing when suddenly it just kind of dropped out of the air and recovered a little bit and then went back to the helicopter. They recovered whatever it was, flew away, and then this thing that was like a surfboard thing just turned flat. So we could see it had a cone shape, and it just started booking off towards the horizon and eventually disappeared like a dot on a television screen when you turn it off. It was moving really fast, but we couldn't get more than one little or two frames of it on Dennis's phone, and it looked like an acorn. It was, but surfboard shaped. Very bizarre. But when you said that, that totally came to mind immediately.
Yeah,
weird how many people have similar.
Yeah, and it's something to do with helicopters too. This guy, he was getting buzzed. It was a holiday too, and he was just getting buzzed because he's a guy who's out there, much like you. He's talking about these things. He's seeing things. Well, he's mostly exposing like reptilian videos of people like trying to shapeshift. So people already assume this guy's a nut, but he's getting a lot of attention from this. And like, there's little orbs flying out. So my co-host here, I know they got a lot of questions for you. So I'm gonna throw to Jude. Jude, what do you got for Christo, man?
Dude, oh my God, my mind is reeling. There's so much shit to talk about. But I mean, just like, I'm trying to think about something that you may not get asked all that often.
Sure.
But when you were describing the orbs, like that you could identify them as being organic, that they grow and shrink, and that they're communicating with each other, and that they're kind of entangled with one another as they kind of were, as you're saying with the like the leader one and younger ones. I'm just wondering, like, have you picked up anything about, I don't know, are they breeding? What are they doing? Like,
that's a very, very good question. I'm glad you asked that. As far as I can tell, I have been able to capture, and it's on my YouTube page. I can't right now just off the top of my head remember what that particular sighting is, but there is a sighting on my YouTube page. It's a triangle that rises from the sea, I believe. It's something like that. And in that video, I observed a behavior which I call melting. And what happened was after this triangle rose out of the ocean, it rotated on its axis. Two of the other orbs flew away. A small juvenile orb manifested next to the big one that remained, which was very deep, bright red one. And very slowly, the smaller orb moves closer and closer and closer in proximity to the big one until the big one distends this thing that looks like electricity, but it's like there's a halo around these things, and the halo kind of distorts, reaches out, grabs the smaller orb, and then pulls it right into itself until they both merge. And I don't know if I'm pretty convinced that is the process of creating more of them. But this is an observation that I've made like half a dozen times or so that I filmed. They do this stuff for me seasonally. It doesn't happen, it happens it usually happens in the summertime, which, is best weather conditions. It's a time where the time corridor is backlit, so I can see them in daylight as well. But yes, I believe that they do actually have some kind of breeding, but not in because I don't know what they actually are.
Right.
All I know is that I have seen them join, and then after they joined, several more of them come out of the bigger one.
No. Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. and when, like I was telling you, when these things were coming from the horizon, there would always be what I like to call a conductor, and that's one of the big orbs that will post in a certain position, either during, like these observations that I have when you see them on YouTube and they're doing these triangles, look to the right or to the left, and you'll always notice one of those orbs is stationary, like it's conducting this thing, and it's slightly winking as they're doing these formations. So, go figure, I leave it to your imagination.
You usually see that one lead orb, and it'll be one shape. It'll be a triangle.
Yeah.
Then it's a wedge. Then it's almost formed into like a wing shape. And it's
not like all of a sudden somebody on board flight 756, goes back to the people on board of the. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to coordinate to do a spectacular formation for the gentleman down on the beach there.
Right.
You don't mind if you put on your seatbelts? We're going to fly upside down for a couple of minutes now.
That actually
don't say it's flares either. I don't want to hear the flares argument with you.
It's
ridiculous.
I've gotten that one.
Like
that's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It relates to one of my questions.
The flare guy. That people say you pay. Is it the guy you pay to see the flares in Monterey? I'm like, you must be thinking of somebody different. I don't see you taking money.
He must be very cold up on those mountains because at 5 o'clock on Mount Umunum, it drops 10 degrees every 5 minutes. They close the park at 5 o'clock because the second the sun goes down, the temperatures. There's no places up there that don't have windows that are about 6 or 7 inches high because it just turns into an ice box up there as soon as the sun goes down. So they close the park and make you get your ass out of there. And I have signaled at the top of that mountain in a 7,000-year-old stone circle, and that shit happened. And you're going to see what happened when it happened to us. And it
sounds awesome.
Anyway.
Now, Rob,
I don't want to say, I'm trying to tell you that's going to be great and not give away too much.
I understand, man. You hold it back because we want people to see it. But Rob, I know you got tons of questions, Rob, and I keep cutting you off. So I'm going to shut up.
It's all good.
Going,
no, I was
Rob,
just.
Let's get him in.
I was just. While you were saying that about the triangles, I was wondering if you have any theories yourself on the significance of triangles as opposed to why you're not seeing why there aren't squares up there, and you know what I mean.
Well, yes, there are different shapes too. Just so you know, Rob, there's the thing we call the eyes of God, which is when they're next to each other. That's them saying, "We see you." There's another one that they do where they're in a tower and they're usually lined up, at least 3 to 5 of them at a time, and that's when they'll go into this formation to let you know that they're going to start mimicking something real soon. And that they're going to have to split. The triangle is a sign of unity and that we're together. And, also it's an identifier for me because, like I told you, that sighting that I had down on, in Seaside over the restaurant with Greg, that was a big triangle. And that was the first time I had seen a shape in a formation.
Really?
Okay? So,
gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, before that, like I told you, I'm filming little dots in the sky, and
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing about your documentary is like I've never seen so many of those giant triangles like consecutively, like in all of your stuff. Like that's something that people rarely are able to capture like once, and you're able to.
I know. Well, that's the randomness thing too. So they're not just. I mean, they're all over the place. I have a good friend of mine. There is a site where you can see similar objects, and it is the same objects, the orb ones that I'm filming. But sometimes here, the objects, for whatever reason, will go inland to the desert. Don't ask me why, but they do. And a good friend of mine by the name of Steve Barone, and I'm giving you a plug right now, Steve, because I fucking love your ass. He's like me. He's a guy in the field who, you go onto Steve Barone's site, and he lives in Las Vegas. And so here we are looking at the strip in Las Vegas with the air traffic moving right to the airport, and UFOs are doing these same things that I'm doing. Now, he's not signaling, but I also believe that once they identify themselves to you and they give you an opportunity to make the choice of, moving forward and having more contact with them or not, they can sense you as well. I'm not 100% positive, and I've had discussions with this, about people that I've done it with and the scientists and everybody that, there's probably an identifier marker that there's some kind of telepathic ability on their part, probably to